Why would you buy Bitcoin if it meant you had to trade money for it? You need money to pay for things you need and want. You need money, you need cash to pay for groceries. You need a debit card to pay for your car payment. So then, if we used money to buy Bitcoin, we wouldn't have money to pay for the things we need and want, right? Or can we? And that's exactly what I want to talk about today. Is Bitcoin money? Let's go back to the very beginning, and I mean way back to the beginning, before you and I were even born. Because in order to understand the question, is Bitcoin money, we have to understand how money came to be what we know it as today. But before we do that, if you like the content so far and you want to keep learning more about Bitcoin with me, do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell notification icon so you can stay updated with me to learn more about Bitcoin. Back in the year 6000 BC, or about 8,000 years ago, the only way that you could get what you wanted was to barter. The word barter. That simply means trading for goods and services using other goods and services. Or, a better way to put it, it is simply trading value. In 6000 BC, the dollar as we know it was not around yet. So if you wanted something like food or water, you had to offer up something you owned or a service that you could give in exchange for the food and water. And since I'm kind of hungry right now, let's take this time machine back to the year 6000 BC and see if we can try to barter for some food. Hi, do you have any food?
Hi, I have lot food. Bread, pasta. What do you want?
Can I take the bread?
What you give me?
Do you take money?
Money? What money? No. Give me for food.
Well, I don't have anything. Can I wash your car?
Car? What car? No. Give me thing in hand. Look cool.
My phone? No, this is too expensive.
Then no food. You give me something.
I don't have anything else.
No. Bread no free.
So I'm back in modern times, and as you can see, bartering doesn't always work, clearly. I wanted food from him, but I had nothing of value that he wanted from me, except for maybe my phone, but you wouldn't trade your phone for some slices of bread, would you? So instead I had other goods and services. I offered to wash his car, but obviously they didn't have cars yet back in the year 6000 BC. So how can we be sure that we can get what we want without worrying about whether or not what we have to offer would even be accepted? This is how the idea of a medium of exchange came to life. A medium of exchange is an item or an object, something that has value or worth. It exists just so that you can use it to trade or exchange for something else, like cash, for instance. It's something that everyone agrees has value, and you can use it to trade for anything that you could possibly need. On the other hand, though, you could also trade for this medium of exchange. For instance, you can trade something you own or a service of yours. You can trade that for this medium of exchange. This way, for instance, if your only valuable skill was building a house, which really is a very valuable skill, but if that was all you had to offer, you wouldn't have to worry about having to build a house for someone every single time you needed something simple, like a gallon of milk or a loaf of bread. Instead, you could build a house for someone, they'll pay you with that medium of exchange, and then you can use just a little bit of that medium to pay for things like food and water. One of the earliest examples of a medium of exchange brings us back to about 5,000 years ago, to the land of Mesopotamia. Now, Mesopotamia today no longer exists, but today What used to be Mesopotamia is made up of countries like Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Kuwait. And the people of Mesopotamia back then, they used things like snail shells as their medium of exchange. Other countries used things like stones, for instance. Other countries throughout Africa, Asia, North America used things like seashells. And the bigger the seashell, the prettier the seashell, the more rare the seashell, the more value the seashell had. So check out all these seashells. Look at how beautiful they all look. Take a look back at when I traveled back in time. See what happens when I try to use seashells to pay for food. Okay, I'm back. I have something you might like this time. Look at these beautiful seashells.
No seashells, no.
But why not? They're so big and pretty. It's gotta be worth something.
No seashell everywhere.
But this is all I have.
Too bad.
But they're so rare.
No rare. Something better.
So I guess paying with seashells doesn't work anymore. But why not? Why can't we pay with seashells anymore? Well, as it turns out, it's very hard to compare the value of two different seashells. They come in different shapes, colors, sizes, qualities. Two seashells might seem very similar at first glance, but they actually might be very different. This one is chipped, this one has a lot of blemishes, but they look very similar. So how do you compare the value of the two? It's actually very hard to judge the value of a seashell from one to another. And as societies became more advanced, people found and developed better and easier ways to find seashells. They just started showing up everywhere. Look. Everywhere. So much so that they became worthless. Nobody would consider anything valuable if you could find it anywhere, right? And they're very easy to break, making it worthless. Maybe it's time to go back to bartering. Just kidding. No one wants to go back to bartering. You saw how challenging that was. Instead, we can use something that has all the benefits of seashells without any of the drawbacks. It has to be just as pretty, but it also has to be harder to break and also a lot harder to find. What is this? Something like gold. Maybe I can use this to pay for my groceries. We'll see. Gold fit this need perfectly. It did everything seashells and stones could do, but better. In fact, gold is also extremely hard to find. It's not worth less just because you break it in half or change its shape. That's because the value of gold is determined by its weight, not just its appearance. A pound of gold is worth a pound of gold no matter what, unless it's fake, like this one. When people started first using gold, they were exchanged in the form of bars. It really wasn't until about 600 BC that people started using gold in the form of coins, like this one, but this one's just a piece of chocolate. However, the real gold coins became standardized. Standardized meaning they only came in specific sizes, different sizes corresponding to a different amount of gold. Different amount of gold meaning different value, just like the penny, the dime, the nickel, and the quarter. Now that we have an effective medium of exchange, people began to start saving it because they knew that they could use it to buy whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. They didn't necessarily have to use all of it in one day. But the more that people began to save their gold, the more space it began to take up. People began to realize very quickly how difficult it was to store their gold at home. And storing gold at home also made it very difficult to try to protect and hide your gold from potential thieves. Also, because certain things cost a lot more than others, when people wanted to buy things that were expensive, it became very hard to carry and move around a lot of gold simply to buy something. So finally, banks came into existence, like the one right behind me. Banks kept our gold safe for us. When we put our gold into the bank, in return, we would get banknotes like this one. These banknotes are pieces of paper published by the bank that has written on the note telling you how much gold you would get in return if you brought this back to the bank. So people started using these banknotes as a medium of exchange. It did the same thing as gold because it essentially represents gold, and it was less difficult to carry around on a daily basis. Eventually, these banknotes started to look like these. Oh, and just FYI, you can't actually exchange these for gold at banks anymore, but that's going to be for a different video. But even cash got too annoying to carry around, and so over the years we came up with something better. A small piece of plastic that fits perfectly inside your wallet. One tap or one swipe, and this represents hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of different banknotes, or dollars as we call it. In the year 2020, all of the in-person transactions, meaning anything that you had to pay for in person, whether it was to pay for your groceries, to pay for your gas, to pay for your movie theater tickets, only 28% of all of those transactions were completed using physical cash. 31% of those transactions were completed with a credit card. 34% were completed using a debit card. So that means in the year 2020, 65% of all transactions, more than half of all in-person transactions, were completed using some type of a plastic card. Only 28% were completed using physical cash. Are you starting to see where I'm going with this? Well, that's right. That's because this is exactly what Bitcoin is. I know we haven't talked about it much yet, but for now, all you have to know is that you can't actually touch Bitcoin. You can't hold it in your hands. All Bitcoin is numbers being moved around on computers, except unlike numbers being moved around on privately owned computer networks like banks and credit card companies, nobody owns the computer network of Bitcoin. Look, I know that just because you can move numbers on a computer screen, that doesn't make it cash. But you can't deny the fact that most of the way we spend money today, for instance, PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, credit cards, debit cards, you can't deny that all of that looks closer to Bitcoin than it does to things like gold bars, gold coins, seashells, stones, even quarters, and even cash. What we recognize as money today isn't always what it used to look like. The appearance of money is always changing. It's constantly evolving. Maybe Bitcoin is just this next chapter or next evolution. Just maybe. But like we said before, for anything to qualify as a medium of exchange or money, it has to be accepted everywhere. But Bitcoin isn't. Why is that? Well, I'm not going to tell you today because